want to do something a little bit fun for this podcast here. And because we were talking about Clayton Kershaw's legacy with the Dodgers, it got me thinking about legacies in total. And especially here in Los Angeles, there's been a lot of legacy guys on championship teams and championship teams that are iconic into LA history. Now, there's been a lot of championship teams, not only with the Dodgers, the Lakers, especially with 17 NBA titles, but the LA Kings, the Sparks, championships, the Galaxy championships are they're not hard to find here because we are the king of world championships. Los Angeles is the king of world championships, and we own them like we own pairs of underwear. So I've comprised a list of the greatest 15 championship teams in LA sports history. Now, this list is pretty much based off of the impact that it made to the city of Los Angeles during its time when they won it. So obviously we have teams that have won multiple championships. I'm not going to list every single championship that every team has won, but I think I'm going to list the teams that made the most impact for the city at the time. So the top 15 greatest championship teams in LA sports history. All right, so kicking off the list at number 15 is the 2002 Los Angeles Sparks. Now, the reason why I have them on there, it's the first time the LA Sparks won a championship in their team's history. I know they've won it 2 other times, but the WNBA got started a few years before that. I think they got started in, 97, 98, around there. Hadn't been around a whole lot of time, but, the fact that you had a woman like Lisa Leslie, who was pretty much the face of the league around that time, and definitely the face of women's basketball, and definitely set the precedent for years to come with women's sports and who was going to be involved in women's sports for years to come. She was the precedent of it. Obviously the first woman to dunk in a WNBA game. Lisa Leslie was the woman for the WNBA and pretty much set the Los Angeles Sparks for what was to come in the future. All right, at number 14, we have the 2023 LAFC, the Los Angeles Football Club. Kind of like the Sparks, a new team in Los Angeles, although the MLS has been around for decades and decades prior. The Los Angeles Galaxy were pretty much the team in LA, but in 2020 the LAFC came into the MLS, and in 2023 they won their first MLS Cup, and that's pretty surprising considering that they are an expansion team, and to get the job done right away was really, really impressive. And to mark their spot into LA history, I got to give them the number 14 spot. With that, though, at number 13, I'm going to go with another MLS team, like the team I just mentioned, the 2002 Los Angeles Galaxy. Like I had just mentioned, the MLS was around for years and years and years, but Los Angeles really didn't take soccer too seriously. Obviously we have a very rich Hispanic heritage in Los Angeles, but people in Los Angeles, if they are ingrained into soccer, they root for teams like Mexico and all the other leagues that are into those leagues. And so in soccer there's leagues and leagues and leagues upon leagues and leagues. It's really hard to keep up with, but that's who they root for if you are ingrained into soccer. So in Los Angeles, soccer really didn't matter a whole lot compared to all the other sports franchises. So when the Galaxy won the MLS Cup in 2002, it really set the precedent for kids growing up, for superstars they could root for, and guys who were in the European and Mexican soccer leagues to come over to Los Angeles in the next following years. A guy like David Beckham, a guy like Landon Donovan, for kids to grow up with and root for. That really set that championship team in 2002 really set soccer on a stage here in Los Angeles in which it was never like that before. Next on the list is number 12 is the 1988 Los Angeles Lakers, the team that had just finished winning back-to-back championships over the Detroit Pistons. And look, that team was coming off an impressive run, the Showtime run in LA Lakers history. Pretty much people still look at that run as the greatest run of sports in basketball. The Showtime Lakers. People still revere that time. They had just come off 5 NBA championships, back-to-back titles under Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, head coach Pat Riley, all those cast of characters that combined, they came off back-to-back championships and was the last championship for Magic Johnson and those guys. And so for that reason alone, coming off back-to-back championships and really setting the NBA for success. Them and the Celtics, they really set the NBA up for success that they're still thriving off of, building off of from that era. And so for that reason alone, I have the 1988 Lakers on there. And at number 11, I'm going to have the 2020 Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, I know what you're going to say. That was the COVID year. That was the bubble year for the Dodgers. They only played, 60 games in that season? And that's fine. You could say that. That's why it's kind of low on this list, to be honest. But for a lot of people, that was the redemption for the Dodgers losing in 2017 against the Houston Astros and losing in 2018 against the Boston Red Sox. That was Clayton Kershaw's first World Series ring. He was a part of that roster, even though he nearly choked again in that 2020 playoff run. But we're not going to talk about that. But the 2020 Dodgers, even though Julio Urias was the pitcher that closed it out for the Dodgers, he's kind of a man that's not really talked about anymore for good reason. But the 2020 Dodgers won the World Series in the COVID year against the Tampa Bay Rays, and that was really something for people in Los Angeles to really get behind after a really shitty year. So for that reason, I have the 2020 Dodgers. All right, let's see here. At number 10, I have the 2012 Los Angeles Kings of NHL. And so look, it kind of like the MLS of soccer, the NHL, even though a much bigger publication, a much bigger league franchise of, sports in general. Obviously in the East Coast and in Canada, hockey is number one. That is basically what football is here in America. That hockey is number one. But in Los Angeles, it's not nearly number one, nor is it number two. Okay, it's barely passable for number 3, to be honest. But when the LA Kings finally won a Stanley Cup in 2012, that was huge for all those loyal and diehard fans that have stuck with the LA Kings through horrendous years, through the 90s and the early 2000s. The 2012 Kings, I believe that's the team that was down. Were they down 0-3 in every series? Correct me if I'm wrong on that. With the 2012 Kings, that was a sweet redemption year for that team, and for that reason alone, I have them at the number 10 spot. All right, number 9, I'm going to go with the 2000 Lakers. All right, so with that is the first year of multiple championships, back-to-back, 3 consecutive championships for Kobe, Shaq, and Phil Jackson in that era, the three-peat era. They won it against the Indiana Pacers, and that year is pretty special to me because that's the first year I remember watching basketball. And so for those reasons, that was, and also keep in mind, the Lakers had not won a championship in 12 years. That is a long time to go without championships. Probably the longest time we could ever recall in Lakers history. 12 years, no championship. So the 2000 Lakers are going to sit there at the number 9 spot for those reasons. And at number 8 is going to be the 2020 Lakers. I know what you're saying. Like the 2020 Dodgers, it was the bubble year. But it's much different in that regard. Because in baseball, they only played about, 60 games, which is a fraction of the season. In 2019, 2020, the Lakers played majority of the season that year, and they were the number 1 seed. You go back and remember, the Lakers were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference all year long, and probably the best team in the NBA. Now, people obviously were rooting for the Clippers to beat the Lakers. They were fantasizing the Clippers being better than the Lakers, and yeah, the Clippers had won some regular season games over the Lakers, but you know what? In my head, that was never going to happen. And it showed when the bubble started, the Clippers, they flailed out. You know what? Look at the Clippers couldn't handle it. The Lakers got themselves together, led by LeBron James, led by Anthony Davis, and they took that bubble, and they were the best team. Like I said, they were the best team all year long, even with fans in the arena. Take fans out of it, they just united together, they focused, and in that bubble, they conquered it. So for that reason, I'm going to put them at the number 8 spot. All right, so at number 7, we're going to have the 2022 LA Rams, the Super Bowl winning Los Angeles Rams in 2021 2022. For that season, it was a redemption of, I would say, a 4 or 5 year arc of when when the Rams came back to Los Angeles. They had moved from St. Louis, originally from Los Angeles. They had moved to St. Louis in 94, 95, and they spent a lot of years in St. Louis. And they won a Super Bowl in St. Louis, but that wasn't Los Angeles. They won a Super Bowl in St. Louis, but for many years after that, they sucked. The Rams completely sucked. In 2016, owner Stan Kroenke moved the team back to Los Angeles. And to be honest, you know what? That was the best move he could make. Even though he's a Colorado guy and he has multiple franchises in the Colorado area, including the Nuggets and the Avalanche, the best thing for him to move the Rams to was Los Angeles so he can make a boatload of money. And the first thing he did was build SoFi Stadium. That was a humongous asset for the Rams. Building SoFi Stadium, pretty much comparable with Jerry World in Dallas, that was a huge asset for the LA Rams. And then it was just building the right team around the Rams. They drafted Jared Goff. They had Todd Gurley around the time, and of course led by defensive tackle Aaron Donald, who was all-world. Eventually, Jared Goff got them to a Super Bowl with Aaron Donald and a cast of characters. But they lost to the New England Patriots in 2018. We lost to the Patriots, and questions were wondering now. And also, I forgot to mention, under head coach Sean McVay. They hired Sean McVay at just 30 years old. Very much a question mark on if he could get the job done as head coach. But Sean McVay carried them to a Super Bowl in 2018, even though we lost against the Patriots. But like I said, question marks were starting to gather if Jared Goff could be the guy that could be the quarterback for the future. And the Rams ultimately decided he was not going to be that guy, and they traded him to the Detroit Lions for Matthew Stafford. And in that 2022 season, the Rams it was just a culmination of just getting there, but not quite getting there. And in that 2022 season, it wasn't pretty, especially in the playoffs. We almost choked that game away against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the Rams in the NFC Conference Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers, we conquered them. They were pretty much our big demons of that season. Conquered the 49ers, and then in the Super Bowl, we beat the Cincinnati Bengals to gather our second Super Bowl championship. So it was a culmination of just many years not being able to get the job done. And in that 2022 season, they could claim themselves as Super Bowl champions and getting Aaron Donald his coveted Super Bowl ring. All right, so next on the list at number 6 is going to be the 2009 Los Angeles Lakers. And for me, that's a very special year as well. That's the year I graduated high school. And the next day after I graduated high school, that's the day the Lakers won the NBA championship. A team led by the legendary Kobe Bryant. In 2000, 2001, 2002, the Lakers three-peated. And that was basically Shaq's team. Shaq was the MVP of those seasons, of those finals. And that was Shaq's teams. But Kobe wanted it, and he wanted it desperately. Obviously, after that, Kobe went through all the Colorado stuff. And he redeemed himself. He switched to number 24, had to endure a couple bad seasons, but in 2008, they got to the finals, but they lost against the Boston Celtics, and that was all the fuel they needed to come back in 2009 and really just kick ass. They went 65-17 that regular season, and then in the playoffs, it wasn't easy. I remember that Houston series being a dogfight. But in that 2009 NBA Finals, Kobe Bryant garnered his 4th NBA championship and was really the redemption that he was looking forward to, finally bring the Lakers on his own to carry the Lakers to an NBA championship. But they also had Pau Gasol, so that was his second banana that helped them. All right, so we're getting into the nit and gritty here. We're going to get into the top 5 here. Top 5 championship teams in LA sports history. All right, at number 5, we're going to go with the 2001 Los Angeles Lakers. That team went 15-1 in the postseason, and that was in the midst of the three-peat with Shaq, Kobe, and Phil. Like I said, people look at that Showtime Lakers squad as, probably the greatest teams in Lakers history. Well, there's a lot of people that look at this club as the greatest teams in LA Lakers history. And so the 2001 Lakers were just unbeatable. They swept their way through pretty much all of the series in the playoffs. I think they swept through Portland, San Antonio. Was Sacramento in there? I believe they might have been, but they swept their way through all the Western Conference teams. And they got to the finals that year against Allen Iverson and the 76ers. They lost game 1 of that series because they basically didn't take them seriously, and Iverson just went off in that game. And Iverson has that historic, iconic step over against Tyronn Lue. And that's always going to be remembered in the history books. But look, at the Lakers went 15-1. They ended up sweeping the rest of that series against the 76ers. And that was an iconic team. Not just in Lakers, in Los Angeles sports history, but NBA history, that team. So that is the number 5 team. At number 4, we're going to go with the 1988 Los Angeles Dodgers. That's a team that won the World Series after many years of not being able to win it. Obviously, they had that historic moment after Kirk Gibson hit that home run against the Oakland A's in the World Series. In the game after, they won the World Series in 1988. That was also the same year the Lakers won it, so pretty historic year, if you ask me. But the 1988 Dodgers, people love that team. And that was going to be the last remaining Dodgers championship team for years and years and years to come. And so a lot of old heads will remember that team as pretty much the good times. And even though we are in really good times in Dodgers history, that 1988 ball club is going to remain in people's hearts forever. That's why I have it at number 4. All right, number 3, for me, it's going to be the 2010 Los Angeles Lakers, a team that went 7 games against the Boston Celtics in 2010. That team won back-to-back championships. They won it in 2009. Of course, they were in the finals in 2008. But in 2008, like I said, they had lost against the Boston Celtics, and they lost in embarrassing fashion in Game 6 against the Celtics in 2008. 2009, Kevin Garnett got hurt, so that prevented the Celtics from reaching the finals again. But in 2010, it was game on, baby. Kevin Garnett was healthy. The Celtics were back, and the Lakers were just coming off their championship, and they honestly didn't look at that 2009 championship as something like, yeah, it was an accomplishment to win the title, but it wasn't against the Celtics, and that's what made the 2010 NBA Finals so historic and so impactful, because the Lakers wanted revenge. I remember when the Lakers won the Western Conference championship. It was in Phoenix, and I think it was who was presenting the Lakers the championship trophy at the time. It was just the Western Conference trophy, basically. But normally any other team would be celebrating. They would have had hats on. They would have had shirts on. No bubbly, but the hats and the shirts definitely would have been on for any other team. But the Lakers decided not to wear any of that stuff during that moment. They basically said, "Bring on the Celtics." That's what they said. And boy, did they want the Celtics, and they got the Celtics. And that series went 7 games, an historic series. I remember watching that Game 7, not being able to eat. And you know me. If anybody knows me, I love to eat. But not being able to eat, and all I could do was just focus on what the Lakers needed to do to get that win done. And they were down 13 points, I believe, in, was it the second half? Down 13 points. And that was a slow, gritty game. But the Lakers ended up getting it done on the Staples Center home floor. And keep in mind, that was Kobe Bryant's last NBA championship ring. So very, very special indeed to my heart. And that's why it's number 3. All right, top 2. We're going to go with, at number 2, the 1985 Los Angeles Lakers. Now, if the 2010 Lakers were special in my heart, the 1985 Lakers were special in many, many people's hearts because, yeah, the Lakers had won the title in 1980, 1983, but for years, for decades, they had lost against the Boston Celtics. They had never beaten the Celtics in any NBA Finals up until that point, not until 1985. And in fact, in 1984, just the year prior, they got embarrassed by the Celtics. They got embarrassed. And so what, how like the 2010 Lakers got embarrassed? Well, this was 20 years before. And look, that was an embarrassing moment for the Lakers. In 1985, they came back and they beat the living hell out of the Celtics in Game 6 to win the NBA championship on the Celtics' home floor. That was a huge, huge moment for all of Los Angeles to be able to finally, after years of the Celtics just beating us like dogs. In 1985, the Lakers finally beat the Boston Celtics, and that was something that they could hang on to for the rest of time. That's why I have the 1985 Lakers right there. All right, and at the number one spot, I'm going to put the 2024 Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, here's why it's number one in my book. Like I had mentioned, 2020 was a bit of a redemption for the city of Los Angeles, not being able to get the job done against the Astros, not being able to get the job done against the Red Sox. Years before that, they had lost. I believe they lost against the Cardinals a couple times. They lost against the Cubs. They lost against the Mets. That was all through a decade of just losing. And for years, I mean, we didn't know if the Dodgers could ever get the job done. In 2020, they got the job done, but it wasn't celebrated because of the pandemic that was going on in the United States and throughout the world. And so in 2024, fans were salivating at the mouth of just being able to finally celebrate a world championship, a team that could finally get the job done, and we could celebrate. And this was the first year of Shohei Ohtani. We had signed Ohtani as a free agent. He came, 7 months before as a free agent in the offseason to come to the Dodgers. He spent his entire career with the Angels, and he was never even able to make the playoffs with them. It got kind of sad. And so Ohtani comes to the Dodgers, and obviously we still had Mookie Betts, we had Freddie Freeman, we had a lot of guys that can get the job done, but not until Shohei Ohtani actually came to the Dodgers where we were able to finally get the job done for our fans of the city of Los Angeles and give them the parade that they desperately deserved. And look, I'll tell you this. I went to the parade back in last October, and when they say 2 million people were estimated there, I fully believe 2 million people were there, because it was wall to wall, and keep in mind, it was outside. We were outside, but just a sardine. I was a sardine in a sea of people, a sea of blue and white, of Dodger fans. We took the metro, the bus out there, and we were packed in that thing. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be a point in my life where we're going to be as jammed up in that metro bus as ever again, because that thing was filled to the gills. And every stop, there was a sea of people trying to get onto the bus, trying to get to the parade. 2 million people, I fully believe it. That was a moment in time where the city of Los Angeles was so desperate to celebrate something. Obviously we had the pandemic. We couldn't celebrate the Lakers and the Dodgers championships. And Dodgers fans are a wild bunch. And we are a passionate bunch, and for us to win the World Series in year one of Shohei, man, it was time to celebrate. And the whole, not even just LA, every neighboring city, pretty much Southern California celebrated, except for the OC's Angels, and they have their little team out there, and that's cute. But the rest of Southern California, we celebrated out there on that day in October, and that's why I put it as number one.